Yeah, there's this weird, the term orphan now. So I was 35 years old and I was an orphan. And of course, we all think of orphans as children from the movies and different things. But like, there's this whole rest of my life now that I have to figure out without the two people that have been there the whole time.
Welcome to The Narratives of Suicide, the podcast where we bring hope, community, and a voice to those who've lost to suicide. It's where we dispel the myths of suicide. We dispel historical discourses and constructs that have been steeped in history for a very long time. And we're here with hope, love, and support for everyone out there who needs to listen to this podcast. I'm so sorry you're here, but I do hope it can give you something to use in your healing process, to be able to pick up the pieces of suicide and put them back together again in the best possible way that you can. Welcome today, everybody. So pleased to have you all here. Today we've got Sasha from Toronto in Canada here to speak with us. Thank you so much for being here, Sasha. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Thanks for making this space to have these conversations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really humbled all the time whenever I hear people's experiences. I always leave with a really warm feeling of just solidarity and companionship on our journey. So thank you for being here to share your journey. And should we start with just saying, what brings you to the grief space, for want of a better phrase or word?
Yeah, sure. The grief space, this crazy little club that we talk about. My mom died 8.5 years ago in an accident. And that's sort of where I began my journey with grief. And then 6 years later, my dad died by suicide. So that sort of changed the trajectory of my grief journey a little bit.
Wow. So that was only 2 years ago you lost your dad?
Yeah, 3 years in September, actually. It's coming up on that anniversary.
Wow. Gosh. So you've been through a lot in such a short space of time, 8.5 years to lose both mum and dad. Wow. Gosh, What a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. And my dad, actually, thinking of the anniversary of his death, it was a week before his birthday. So it's that sort of compounded month of a lot of feelings and a lot of memories.
Yeah, it's August now when we're recording this. It's my birthday this week. It's my brother's next week. My brother that passed away. It's my anniversary. It's my brother's daughter's birthday. So they're the legacies of all of that left behind. And yeah, it's again one of those months that you just think, how are you going to get through being memorable of it, but not allowing it to take your feet from under you like it maybe has done in the past, but being aware it's there, how you negotiate. And September's only around the corner for you. So have you got any plans? Or have you just like shutting it out?
I mean, the last couple of years, I've just sort of done what I felt like doing. It's interesting because with my mom's death and everything around that, it was a little bit more like celebratory in a way. I have always done something on the anniversary of her death and on her birthday and, special memories or whatever. And then somehow with my dad, suicide being part of it has changed that for me, I guess. Yeah, it's strange.
Yeah, that is strange. It shows the differences, doesn't it? How the celebratory part can be affected.
Yeah. And one thing I always think about, because my mom died and I was quite young, I was 29 and I went through what I went through. And after a couple of years, I was like, okay, I did that. I managed. I survived that time. And then when my dad died, I was like, okay, telling myself, I've already been through this. I'm kind of an expert now. I know what to do. And then again, with the way that he died, it came up. Like all of these different layers came with that grief. And then it was like a totally different experience and I wasn't prepared for it. And I didn't know how to maneuver through those waves. Yeah, it was so different. It was surprising even to me because like I said, I thought, okay, I've already been through this. I can handle it. And then it was like a whole different ball game.
And it's so different in so many ways, especially because I think, well, for me, I went from 6 in the family to 4 within the space of a couple of years. And I think for me, that was really significant. I kind of looked around my family and thought, how have we got so small? We were always known as the big family because you've got 4 siblings, it's like,
right.
And suddenly there's just us. So when you go out for meals or you do celebrations, it's really poignant that the numbers are reducing. And so early in my life, I'm only 45 this week, 45. So, how has that happened? Yeah. What were those layers, do you think, of difference then? Do you say there was extra layers or what were they?
Yeah, the layers, this really heavy layer of confusion. And I remember that from the beginning, even until now, but in the beginning, I was like, this couldn't have happened. like, there's no way. It didn't make any sense. And you're constantly trying to figure it out and figure out what else it could have been, or like why somebody told you that, because it can't be true. And like, your brain plays these weird little games with you, and it's like really hard to process. And then the confusion kind of extends as you start to accept it a little bit more. I feel like sometimes when I talk about it, I almost feel like I said that by accident. And then I'm like, nope, that was true. So I don't know if it's almost like this protective thing that your brain does for you when you don't process it all too quickly, because it would be so overwhelming. So it lets a little bit in at the time. But that was the strangest thing, because again, with my mom, it was an accident, and you can accept that, you understand it, you hear about it more, just easier to understand the whole thing. When it comes to death by suicide, you're not, I don't know, none of it made any sense to me. So I think that the biggest layer for me was confusion, and I had to break through that to get to the rest of the grieving process.
Okay. So did you feel you did break through that confusion and to make some sense of it?
I think, almost 3 years later, I'm starting to now, whether it's acceptance, whether it's I've just finally exhausted all of my other options that could have happened, or I feel like 3 years later, it's starting to kind of sink in for me.
Have you done anything to help that process?
Yeah, I'm sort of one of the lucky ones. I've been in therapy for quite a while, off and on through my life. So I've got kind of a team of really good therapists here in Toronto for grief, specifically for some anxiety issues too. But so they've really helped work through that. I also use a workbook that I just really like. And it helps me because sometimes I find like we try to talk to people who have never been through it, and then they don't know what to say. And then it sort of muddles that your feelings a little bit more. So this workbook kind of guides you through your thoughts to help sort of clean them up a little bit more and make you understand what you're feeling. And so I found that really helpful. And I am, now that I'm getting more comfortable talking about it, talking to people like you, I've also just written a collaborative book with a group of women talking about grief. So that's been really helpful to kind of share my story, knowing that hopefully it will help other people who are grieving. So I think just working through it, it's really all you can do.
Yeah, it sounds like you have done something as opposed to, because I hear that a lot it's like a doing action. I have to do something with this. I can't just sit back and do nothing. And helping other people's one, journaling, your workbook, therapy. Some people run, don't they? Just suddenly start running. Or we talked about this recently in a Clubhouse talk, where some people who love chocolate stopped loving chocolate, and some people who never liked chocolate started loving chocolate. It's as if something is just switched, and we just start different behaviours.
That's interesting.
And I think that's because our assumptive world is just so shift. What we expected, our life narrative has shifted. Like we expected something to happen in our life, and this wasn't it.
Right.
Either way, your mum or your dad, neither you expected to happen, did you? So then you had to start rebuild who you are. So you sort of play with all these different, maybe chocolate or not chocolate, or should I run or not? You play with these different things to see what suits you now that you're almost a different person and you're merging into a new you.
Yeah, that's true. The chocolate thing's really interesting. And then, when you think about running too, I mean, part of it, I think, is that there's this new energy that you hold on to that you have to kind of let out somehow. So you have to figure out what that looks like, whether it's exercising or starting a new hobby or using that energy for something, because there's this new little pocket that wasn't there before. And actually, after my mom passed away, I did kind of like a scan of my life and was like, what am I doing? Like, you realize how short it could be. So it's that whole cliche thing of like, you only have so many years. So what am I going to do with it? And I ended up changing jobs, changed careers, actually, went to a new type of work and just started doing a lot more stuff with the community and just trying to really make my time here a little bit more impactful. So it gave me an opportunity to sort of think about what I was doing.
Yeah, because your mum, how old was she?
My mum was 52.
Yeah, so young. Wow.
Yeah, so that was the thing. I thought, I'm 29. If I only have until 52, like if that's the end line for me, what am I going to do with that time?
Yeah.
So
even tomorrow when it's an accident or suicide, even if it's just in 2 seconds, have I done everything in 2 seconds? Well, it just puts death in your face, doesn't it? When we're so avoidant of it naturally, or as a society, not discussing it, talking about it, being aware of it. Or of course we're aware of it, of course it's there, but we're not discussing it and making it a conscious thing that we're discussing, and suddenly it is. in your face, isn't it? The last breath. I remember feeling like that with my mum. Just
Yeah.
the breath is so important. That's everything.
Right.
Breath is everything to me now. Since I saw my mum pass away, it's like death. And my breath is everything. It literally is everything. And that brings you to meditation and mindfulness.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine what that, like, there's a whole image around breath and life and death and what that looks like. I wasn't with either of my parents when they died, which I think also adds a layer of confusion because you're like, well, I didn't see that. Like, I didn't see it happen, or I didn't see them. Yeah. So back to the confusion part. But yeah.
Yeah. I think you imagine it though, don't you? You go through once you know maybe how it happened. I certainly have got memory of that. So I saw my mum pass away. I was there. I didn't see my brother, but I know what he did and where he did it. So I've got an imagined memory of that, which to me haunts me, even though I didn't see it. So it's an internalized trauma. Because I think, our imagination is amazing, isn't it? And we can put ourselves there.
Yeah.
Just piecing it all together.
Yeah, it's true. And similarly to you, I also have in my mind what that looked like and what went on. And yeah, for both of my parents, actually.
Yeah.
And you're right. It causes this extra traumatic piece that you don't even know if it's real or not, but it's real for you.
And it's part of that sense making.
Yeah.
It's almost, I've had to go through that to sense what his moments were like and why he did what he did. And to make sense of it, I had to create that picture in my mind that I could live with, I guess, even though it's horrible.
Sure. Yeah. I think that was a big part of, like I said in the beginning, it was sort of like, this isn't right. None of this makes sense. So we actually had the local police department in the area where my dad lived. My dad lived 5 hours north from where I am in Toronto. And we had the police go back and do an investigation because my brother and I just couldn't even, we were like, there's no way that that's what happened. And then, so from that point forward, when they confirmed and we had to kind of settle into that reality, I started thinking back to conversations with my dad, trying to think if there was something I should have picked up on, because of course you put yourself through that hell, kind of blaming yourself and thinking it should have been something I should have done. I talked to my dad the day before. So right from that conversation that evening, I was like, did he say something? Should I have picked something up? And then, conversations all the way back to the summer before, I was like, well, maybe he was struggling then because he said this weird thing that didn't make any sense. But I just felt like I was trying to find things to make it all make sense, make myself believe it. Right?
Yeah. Make yourself believe it because you kind of have to, because it's reality, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's no black or white answer. Like there might be in other deaths where you get the reason, whether it's a disease or an accident, you kind of get the explanation, and you didn't even get that early on. Then you had a few days, did you, where you just still were absolute, really? Must have been something else. Did you have the proceedings where the police looked into it and all of that going on?
Yeah, totally. It was just it didn't make any sense. And then there's funny little things too that I find my brain did for a while. I'd see somebody that sort of looked like my dad, kind of in a plaid jacket, the things he would wear typically. And then I'm like, maybe he just ran away. Maybe he didn't die. But then that goes away really quickly. And you realize that you're just kind of trying to make yourself feel better by that not being reality, or by creating something other than the hardest reality.
Yeah, comfort yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make it a nicer story. Make it a little gentler.
Yeah. But then it hits you that it's real, and you go through, I guess you went through the small moments where the police tell you then that, how did that unravel from the minute then you're thinking, no, this can't possibly be true with your brother, to finding out or knowing from the police or whoever it was that yes, it was?
Yeah, when it was confirmed sort of the second time, it was all done over email.
Oh.
And so it was just kind of sitting, I can't remember if I was at home or at work when the email came through, and it was sort of shocking. And I remember just thinking well, this is it. We got to get through this now.
Gosh.
And yeah, I mean, it was with yourself in your own head. I remember thinking, I'm not going to blame myself. I'm not going to go through, because you hear about the things that people go through after trauma. And I remember telling myself, I'm not going to blame myself. There's nothing I could have done. But of course, you can only coach yourself through that so much. Yeah.
Okay. So you tried to really coach yourself mentally.
Yeah, because like I said, I had already been through it. I thought it was going to be the same experience as after my mom died. I thought, okay, I can do this. I've got control and I know what this feels like. I know everything that's going to come up. I know the pattern of grief. I know right? Through different conversations, and the fact that my relationship with my dad was different than my relationship with my mom, and then different memories and different feelings around suicide specifically, and plus the layers of now both of my parents are gone. So there was just more to deal with.
Yeah.
Just a whole different, that I wasn't ready for. So it was surprising to me. And I think that's why now 3 years later, I'm like, okay, this is a different process. I have to start to figure this out a little bit differently.
Yeah. The guilt was the layer of guilt. You had the layer of why, the sense making. Then you did the kind of guilt through some self-talk, some self-coaching, which is always helpful, but it didn't get rid of it completely. Your brain still looked for what you could have done differently, which is completely natural and very common. Yeah. How can you not, almost? Because as caring people, who wouldn't?
Right.
If you've got a caring bone in your body, you're going to question yourself, aren't you, as to why or what you could have done differently.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And then that layer of sense making, which you think you've done to some degree by just processing the whole thing through your journaling and your book, helping other people now. What other layers would you say there are compared? And like I just heard you say about it's my mum and dad now. You've got that as well aspect, haven't you?
Yeah, there's this weird, the term orphan now. So I was 35 years old and I was an orphan. And of course, we all think of orphans as children from the movies and different things. But like, there's this whole rest of my life now that I have to figure out without the two people that have been there the whole time. So my mom and my dad were not together. They'd separated when I was very young, but I had very good relationships with both of them. And very different relationships, right? My parents were young when they had my brother and I, so we grew up in this exciting kind of rock and roll world. And I was 29 when my mom died, and it was in January. I turned 30 the following June. And the night before my birthday, leading up to midnight, my husband did this silly little countdown, and he was like, you're going to be 30. Oh my God. And he did 10, 9 all the way down to 1. And then at midnight, I just started crying, and he was like, whoa, I'm really sorry. I don't know what's happening right now. And I looked up at him and I said, I don't know how I'm going to do another 30 years without my mom. Like, that was my first, so now if I make it to 60, I've got 30 years to go without this person that I've needed my whole life. Right. And so fast forward to 35. Now, both of my parents are gone, and trying to figure out what that looks like. As my career was picking up, I don't have children yet of my own. So I don't know what that's going to look like if it happens, or, just as I got married without my mom there. So that's something I never thought would happen. So now all these things I have to kind of do without my parents.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as a woman without your mom.
I mean, I know, unfortunately, I guess now I know a lot of people through this grief community who lost their parents even younger and have had to kind of do it all without them. And it's a crazy space to be in.
Yeah. And how do you do that? I guess you've got your brother. Are you close to your brother? Is that
Yeah.
Yeah.
My brother and I are very close. We're very different people, which I think is good. It's, it's sort of like a lot of relationships and friendships where two people are very different. You become what each other needs. Like if one person's a little bit more hyper and one's calm, you sort of work that out between the two. So that's sort of my brother and I. And I think we were really each other's pillars through both of our parents' deaths. And again, our experiences were very different with that. But I think we just, there's two people who understand what you're going through, and it's the two people who have been through it. So,
oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Yeah, that you've got each other. Same for me, going from 6 to 4. I guess you went from 4 to 2 again so quickly to like, what the hell? Where's the family gone?
Yeah.
So quickly and so young. You're young, I mean,
Yeah.
What do you think there's been a difference in terms of how much you've been able to speak about your mum compared to your dad with friends or other people or openly?
Yeah, I do. Again, because my mom, it was an accident. It was shocking and everybody heard about it kind of quickly. And I don't know, people accept that differently. So then with my dad, if I talked about suicide, I feel like it makes people uncomfortable. People will respond with sort of funny things to try to make you feel better, or try to change the subject, or try to change it from that reality because it makes people uncomfortable. And not necessarily for me talking about it, but having conversations with other people about it is a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. It feels like it's our responsibility. And it feels as if I have the conversation, it's like a drop in a lead weight into the room. okay, this opens up this conversation of suicide, which no one wants to talk about. So then I'm left responsible.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel responsible for my brother's story as well as my own story. It feels as if people might say, well, why or how? And then I've got to cross his story. And I noticed that in my research. I did research and I asked people, just tell me your story. And I didn't say a word for an hour and a half. And I analysed that as part of my thesis. And what I found was for 75% of the conversation, they were talking about why their loved one did it. And it was only at the very end they talked about themselves and how they've recovered and what their life's been like since. And I was like, wow, it feels as if we have to draw a portrait for other people of ourselves, a portrait of our loved one and why they did what they did when we mention suicide. Because people are just inquisitive and they want to know, or they want to pick it apart, just like maybe we did.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to, it feels as if we also draw a portrait for the world. And that's why we maybe go on these, I'm doing a podcast, I'm going to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we can't just put under a carpet and pretend it's not there because it's part of our life now.
Yeah, it's true. Even, looking at writing this book, my chapter for this collaborative book, it's my story of my parents and them both dying and how I've sort of come through to where I am now to this point. It was funny at first because I did think, I'm like, should I be telling this? It's not really my story, but it is my story. It is something that I went through. I was there too.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think we talk about just even with all the good things in life, everything you've been through kind of shapes who you are. And I think grief and death and all the trauma and everything that comes with it is the same, right? And like you said, there's this way that you can sort of help other people and that helps you. Some people don't want to do that. Some people can't do that, and that's fine too. Everybody just kind of settles into their own way of grieving or dealing with what they're going through. And I don't think that there's no cookie cutter for this. There's no box to fit into. We just figure it out. And some of us, it takes a little longer to figure it out. And that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. You seem amazingly calm for only, 2.5 years in. Amazingly it seems like you've done a lot of work to get there though. A lot of thinking, a lot of processing. Or was it all really sad?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely times where it's not this calm for me, or it's not this easy, or it's not this quiet, right? Because there's those waves that you go through. And I mean, I always think about these crazy times where I'll be in the kitchen just cooking, quickly putting something together for my family. And then I hear a song come on in the background, or just a commercial, or just a something. And suddenly I'm like a puddle on the floor because it just brings you back to that moment, or it just reminds you of something that either happened and won't happen again because that person isn't there anymore, or something you really missed out on. My wedding, my dad walked me down the aisle. It's something that I'll never forget. And I'm so thankful he was there. So certain memories of that, or just my brother races motorcycles. He didn't start until a little bit later. Actually, he started, I think, shortly after my dad died, because similarly to when my mom died, for me, my brother thought, I'm going to do this. This is something I've always wanted to do. I'm doing it. But then he won a really big race a couple of weeks ago. And my first thought was, my dad really should have been here for that. So there was some anger that finally came up for me. I was really mad at him. I'm like, how are you not here for this? Right? So stuff like that, it just like those memories that trigger, that take away the calmness of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't know when it's going to hit and why it's going to hit either.
No.
I listened to a song after my brother died every night before I went to sleep. It was nothing to do with him. He didn't listen to it. I felt it reminded me of him and the pain I was in. It was like a real reflective, quite a painful song.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter says, I remember hearing you listen to that every night. And I think I cried myself to sleep to it every night. And it was part of my allowing that grief to come through. The song helped me, I guess, cry and feel the enormity of it. And that song for me now is kind of bittersweet because I feel that it really helped me through that. But it's a really painful song. And from these years on now, I can kind of see that as almost a therapeutic song for me. And I have quite a warm relationship with it. And I remember sending the message to the artist saying, thank you for that song. But at the time it was so painful. And it's funny how I'm just thinking about now, I'm reflecting on how different I feel now to then. And I almost forget about how painful that was now. I almost, because it's lost its power, unless I sit and actually think about that time, I often just, my memory is just, oh, it was fine. I think that's part of our defenses as well, and our mechanism of creating some peace and calm for ourselves right now, because we don't want to keep going back there. We can't keep going back there.
I don't want to keep going back there. I can't keep going back there. I've got a life. I've got children. I've got things I'd like to do with my life and live for my brother and do for my brother in his honor. And
Yeah, absolutely. And to touch on that, I do remember after my mom died, I said to somebody, one of my close friends, I was like, I don't know, I can't do this. My whole life is going to change. This is going to be just terrible. Like, I'm going to be sad forever. And we were on the phone and she paused and she said, Sasha, you still have your right to live. You still have your life and you have the right to live it. I've held on to those words every day since, because there's this guilt involved. Like, if I smile again, or if I laugh, or if I go out with my friends, are people going to think I'm over it? Or are people going to think I don't care that I lost somebody, or am I not sad anymore? But like, you don't necessarily have to stay there. You don't have to stay in that like deep sadness. It doesn't mean it's going anywhere. I mean, we talk about like we use the word survivor, suicide loss survivor. I don't think it's something we ever hit the finish line for to survive. I think every day we're surviving it. We're going through it, where every step forward we take is survival, right? But just because we have good days doesn't mean we're over it. And like, another thing that really stood out to me that you said, listening to that song, it helped you cry and feel the enormity of it. And you let yourself feel what you were feeling, and you didn't listen to a song that made you happy to pretend that you weren't sad, or to try to like push those feelings away. You let yourself really feel it. And I think that's something most of us are afraid to do, because it feels like when you go that deep, it's going to be impossible to come out. But I think when you get to that point where you realize you have to let yourself feel what you're feeling to work through it, then, I think that's when the process starts a little bit quicker.
Yeah, giving ourselves permission. Well, it's just a fear, isn't it? Yeah, there's a fear that if I go that deep, I'm never going to get out again. It feels like a real painful hole. And I think back to that time, and I've got 4 children, so I was busy working with 4 children, so I couldn't let go in the day.
Right.
So it was only when I went to my room and my own and shut the door that I could allow it. And that song, I guess, allowed me to do it then, park it for the rest of the day when I had to just be coping, which I know people find really hard to do. We go into this complete avoidance stage, don't we, where we just knuckle down, get on with work. Some people go back really quickly, and that can be helpful because there's a routine, but sometimes it can be a strategy, a defensive mechanism, can't it, to avoiding it completely and not processing those feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. People would rather be distracted and not deal with it. But, there's this story of if you try to push a ball down into water, like push a basketball down into water, the more you push it, eventually it's going to pop back up and explode and hit you in the face. And I think that's what happens too with all of those hard feelings, where you try to suppress it and pretend it's not there and push it down. And then sort of when you're least expecting it, and usually not at a great time, it'll all show up again, and it's right in your face.
Yeah. And the most opportune moment as well.
Yeah. So I think if you've structured in that time to listen to a song or do what it is that brings it out for you, I think that's more helpful. And it's sort of like you have control over what the process is.
Like your workbook, I guess. And like those times.
Yeah, when you're ready to sit down and deal with it at that moment. So it doesn't just show up when you're trying to do other things like be a mom and work and all those other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so your book, how can people get hold of your book?
Yeah, so the pre-sale starts at the end of this month, at the end of August. And then after that, I can't remember the dates, I think in September, it'll be on Amazon, and I'm not sure what other stores in Canada for sure. But I'll post on my Instagram when I get more information about that.
Well, we'll put it in the link as well. If you send me the link, I'll put it in the notes of the show so people can get hold of it.
Okay.
So it's really a group of you sharing your grief experiences of any type of loss, of any type of relationship.
Yeah, it's all written by women who have lived experience with grief, and everybody's story is a little bit different. What the story was, who it was that they lost, and how they've sort of come to this point. And again, you're not how you've come through it, how you've gotten over it, are not things that we do or say, but it's how we've gotten to this point, to the point we can talk about it, or the point that we can enjoy our lives with this sort of hole still existing with us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how we can still live our lives with this hole existing in us and continue on anyway. Nice.
Yeah.
Love that. So how's your career changed? What are you doing now?
I work in healthcare now. I work at a hospital in Toronto. I work in the president's office, but I work for the vice president of research and also the executive director of social medicine. So both very exciting hopeful areas of the world. And I was in legal world before. I worked in law. So very different motivation for the type of work that they are. I was never interested in the sort of money driven world of the legal world, and it didn't motivate me. It wasn't something I could wake up and get excited about every day. So working in healthcare and community health, I also volunteer with a charity for women surviving homelessness. So that's something that I do on the side.
Right.
So again, just diving deep into the community and how I just want to be helpful while I'm here.
And that was after your mum's death, really, that you started to really look at all that and change, make big changes.
Yeah. And yeah, part of that is because of who my mom was. My mom was a personal support worker. So she was a healthcare worker. She worked in nursing homes, and all the feedback we ever got about her was she was the best. She was the most caring, compassionate. And I mean, I can say that as her child, she was the most compassionate, caring, loving person. And I think I just felt like I need to do that too. I need to carry that on for her.
Yeah. I found that in my research too, where, especially with a child loss of a parent, a need to adopt the personality. With the motorbike racing with your brother, if your dad was a motorbike racer, you're wanting to be caring like your mother. I saw that more with children with parent loss than in any other, like sibling loss or parents with lost children. It seemed really significant that you took on their hobbies, their passions. It's almost as if you're trying to live through them now, for them, with them, or get to know them almost, like how they would have lived now through what they did, what they were like.
Yeah, it's true. You feel like you want to carry on all the great parts about them. You don't want to lose those things. So you do it yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice. So if people want to get hold of you, I'll put the Instagram account if people want to get hold of you. Are you okay with people getting hold of you and just...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Using the Grieving Daughter Instagram, I think I'm going to try to build on that account. Yeah.
Okay. So Grieving Daughter on Instagram, but I'll put the link in the notes. Is there anything else you want to leave people with before we finish? Anything else you want to...
Yeah, I mean, I think the main message that I always try to comfort people with, I guess is the right word, is that people told me in the beginning that it gets better with time or time heals. And I never really felt like that was true. I don't feel like as the years go on, it necessarily gets easier, because like 2 weeks not talking to your mom is kind of manageable. And then as the months go on and you haven't spoken to that person for months, it gets a little bit harder, actually. Time doesn't heal. Time makes things a little bit harder in that sense. But I think with all the other things that come up in life and how you process your grief and how you talk about it and how you manage it, sort of those waves that we talk about. So some days will be a lot easier than they were in the beginning. And some days will still be really, really tough. And I think as long as you kind of know that that's going to happen and you're prepared for it and you know how to deal with it, that's what actually makes it a lot easier. That's what I've found.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how to deal with it is you work out your way, don't you? And everyone has different ways,
sure.
Whether it's motorbike racing or journaling or changing your career, whatever it is. Yeah. Then you work that through in your own time, the how.
Yeah. And everybody's different and every situation is different. Because like I said, from my mom to my dad, and the grief behind both of those losses were very different. And even another thing that stands out, when my mom died, every day I would look through pictures and I would be looking through every photo album, whether it was on the computer or in a book, just looking at pictures of my mom, watching videos, listening to her voicemail, all so that I didn't forget her. I felt like I was going to forget her if I didn't do that. And then as time goes on, you realize that that's actually never going to happen. But then when my dad died, I couldn't look at pictures. I couldn't listen to his voicemail. It was just a very different process, very different experience. So again, you think you're an expert and you know what you're doing, and then something else comes up and it's totally different. So it's this whole new ocean of waves to maneuver, I think.
And different ways of coping then. So yeah, expect different ways, because the relationship is going to be different and the way they died will be different.
Yeah.
And you will be different in that moment because you're different to the first time, second time, third time, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks again for this chat. Very important what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us here today. I hope it served you and given you something for your journey with suicide. Come back and subscribe, like, do whatever you need to do on your platform to help us to raise awareness of suicide, because the more we keep saying the word, the more we can gain support for us left behind, and the more we can raise awareness of the word and how society sees it and reduce this stigma that's so attached to it. Please get in touch. You can find me on my website, suicidegriefsupport.com. I really want to hear from you. But for now, please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And remember, we are stronger together.